Hopefully everybody's having a good Wednesday. Today we're going to be continuing our teaching about planetary magic, correspondences, and physical to meta anchors. Today's video is called Mercurial Thresholds, Physics, Communication, and Sacred Symbolism in the Planet Magic, Mercury, which is the planet of the day for Wednesday. Continuing today with our planetary and color correlating, I'll be covering the figure of Mercury with particular attention to the names Tyrael and Taptarthrath. The numerology of Mercury's magic square, the communicative symbolism of the throat chakra, and the use of green, red, or a deliberate combination of the two as a mercurial template of palette. My aim, once again, is not to claim that modern physics proves ceremonial magic, nor to reduce religion to metaphor, but to place these two domains into a disciplined dialogue. In astronomy, Mercury is the smallest planet in the solar system, the nearest to the Sun, and the one that completes an orbit in about 88 days. It's got the shortest rotation. In Roman religion, it was named for Mercury, the swift messenger god, whose Greek counterpart Hermes was associated with messaging, travel, commerce, trade, trickery, and boundary crossing. The pairing matters because the planet's speed and visibility pattern become the physical backdrop for a mythic and ritual vocabulary of speech, wit, exchange, cunning, and profitable timing. With Renaissance occult philosophy, especially in the Ripon stream, Tyrael is named as the intelligence of Mercury and Taptarthrath as the spirit of Mercury. In the symbolic logic of that tradition, the intelligence of a planet is its higher, ordering, harmonizing, and more governable current, the yin to the yang. While the spirit is the denser, quicker, and more volatile and more operational force. In practical terms, one may read Tyrael as the mercurial principle of lucid thought, lawful communication, precise language, skilled mediation, and elegant intelligence, while Taptarthrath represents the faster and more dangerous side of Mercury, cunning, relentless cleverness, overactivity, instability, trickster logic, and the tendency of language to become manipulation when it loses its ethical center. This distinction belongs to occult theology rather than laboratory science, though, but it does preserve an old insight that remains psychologically relevant. Communication is never morally neutral, and the same faculty that clarifies can also distort. The numerology of Mercury reinforces the idea of speed and organized into pattern. In the traditional planetary Kamea system, the magic square of Mercury is an 8 by 8. Containing 64 numbers, which each row, column, and major diagonal summing to 260, and the whole square itself totaling to 2080. The sequence of associated numbers is therefore 8, 64, 260, and 2080. Symbolically, 8 suggests structure, recursion, cyclical intelligence, and skilled repetition. 64 suggests combinatorial richness, branching choice, and informational density. Mercury's square is therefore less about blunt force than about distributed intelligence. It suggests not a single beam of power, but a matrix of routes, messages, translations, signals, bargains, and pathways. In a spoken presentation, I would describe it this way. Saturn compresses, Mars strikes, but Mercury networks. If that clears it up a little bit. If we now turn to color, scientific precision here becomes essential. As I stated before, it is relevant to stay precise and accurate rather than supernatural on hopes and dreams without proven fact basis. The visible spectrum runs roughly from 400 to 700 nanometers. Green occupies approximately 495 to 570 nanometers, while red occupies roughly 620 to 750 nanometers, and in angstrom terminology, that is about 4950 to 5700 angstroms for green, and about 6200 to 7500 angstroms for red. Because we use green or red or a combination of the two, the honest scientific statement here is that there is no single monochromatic Mercury frequency here, but a green-red mercurial palette is a dual-band symbolic practice. Green can be used to signify exchange, growth, nerve regulation, and adaptive intelligence. Their combination is not a literal occult proof, it is a sensory symbolic scaffold. Physics can tell us what wavelength ranges these colors occupy. Spiritual and psychology practices decide what human meaning is assigned to them, And I will continuously reiterate this until it is fully comprehended for the magnitude it possesses in this perspective. This becomes even more interesting when Mercury is linked to the throat chakra, because Mercury represents speaking and messages, so it is the throat chakra relevant planet. In Yogic tradition, the throat chakra, or Vishuddha, is commonly treated as the center of communication, expression, truth, and being heard. And more generally, the chakra tradition associated each major center with colors and symbolic functions. At the same time, the conventional color coding for the throat chakra is usually blue, so it is not relevant to the Mercury colors, so do not confuse the two. They are distinctively different. It's not red or green or red, so a green-red Mercurial throat practice is not a classical chakra role. It is a cross-system adaptation. That distinction does matter. Scientifically, there's no accepted evidence that a chakra has a measurable octave frequency in that way a photon does. Spiritually, however, though, many traditions use color as a focus for inner work. So the rigorous way to frame this is the throat chakra belongs to a religious yogic system, symbolic system centered on expression and truth, and green-red Mercurial work may be layered onto it as a hybrid practice of speech, negotiation, courage, and discernment rather than a standard inherited doctrine. This is where meditation becomes the bridge rather than a proof. When a person sits with a green light, red light, or a controlled alternation between the two, they are doing several things at once. On a physical level, the eye receives long or middle range wavelength visible light, or the mind vividly imagines these two colors. On a psychological level, attention narrows, symbolic meaning intensifies, and expectation begins to shape the salience of our inner experience. On a spiritual level, the practitioner may interpret the same state as opening to Mercurial qualities: precision, expression, wit, truth-telling, diplomacy, profitable timing, pattern recognition, and the luck of information handled well. Now, the strongest scientific claim available is that meditation may help with stress, anxiety, depression, and related coping processes, though it can also produce adverse experiences in the same practitioner. Some practitioners. The spiritual claim that such a state allows communication with material, contact with that Partharath, or access to a mercurial current belongs to religion and esotericism, not to established physics. The phrase Midas Miser touch, which I'm going to use, which I associate with the planet Mercury because it is, for some people, the planet of luck, contrary to Jupiter being the perceived planet of luck. Mercury itself also produces and contains Midas-like qualities, if you know how to access those. It is useful here as a Mercurial paradox. In mythic and symbolic terms, Mercury is linked to less to royal treasure than to circulation, trade, movement, messaging, conversion, and opportunistic gain, which would also play well in the stock market, crypto, or investments, if you will. Mercury and Hermes are gods of commerce, merchants, travelers, communication, trickery, and thieves. Older classical material even links Hermes to good fortune in the sense of lucky finds and gain through movement. So the Mercurial gift is not exactly gold from nowhere. It is the uncanny ability to turn information into leverage, speech into exchange, timing into advantage, and relation into transaction. Something similar to commercial legal contracts. Now, the shadow side of the same gift is miserliness, fraud, excessive calculation, hollow eloquence, and a reduction to truth strategy. In other words, Mercury blesses both invention and manipulation. Depends on which side of the spectrum you want to stand on, the lesser or the higher. Remember, one you ascend with, the other you descend with. There was only as above or so below, or stagnation. Now, the religious and mythic network around Mercury makes that double edge even clearer. Roman Mercury and Greek Hermes are the obvious core figures here. Messengers, protectors of travelers, patrons of trade, tricksters, and boundary crossers. By functional resonance, Egyptian Thoth also belongs in this conversation because he governs writing, language, learning, reckoning, and interpretation. Very good energy to work with if you want to channel energies more cleanly, clearly, and inherently abundant, I guess would be the word I want to use. All of which are profoundly Mercurial functions. One could therefore say that the Mercurial current across cultures governs not only speech, but the entire architecture of mediation itself. Writing, translation, trade, notation, messaging, contracts, cleverness, wit, and the dangerous freedom of moving between worlds. This is why Mercury is both helpful and morally risky. It can teach eloquence, diplomacy, adaptive intelligence, and creative problem solving. It can also sanction sophistry, deceit, gossip, theft, divided motives, and the rationalization of almost anything. That means trying to justify any nonsense you might have participated in and or did, contrived, tried to do, thought about, or executed. It'd be like stealing from somebody and thinking they weren't going to find out and participating in said theft and then justifying those actions by trying to label them or mislabel them, I might say, in a manner in which you were trying to present them, and also altering environmental factors to sway them to move a certain way to make them appear said manner, even though it's the complete opposite and you should probably seek psychological help and take medication. Stop stalking people. You know who that's for. At this point, we will introduce the phrase quantum field, or quantum lattice field for lack of a better word, as though it offers a scientific guarantee for mystical communication. I need to clarify that it does not. It is just a terminology cross-referencing two different perspectives that interoperate with one another if you know how to anchor them in between. In mainstream physics, quantum field theory describes the behavior of fundamental particles and fields. It does not establish that human consciousness can literally tune itself to a named planetary intelligence by selecting a color band. So if we use the language of a quantum lattice field here, we should use it metaphorically and carefully for accuracy and precision, which is why I chose the wording and verbiage that I did for these specific teachings in a manner that I did, because they can be more scientifically proven rather than just a projection of overall perspective. It is cross-referenced with factual physics, factual science, factual mathematics that are the basis and foundation for this philosophy. Now, in that metaphor, human awareness functions like an informational sensitive lattice. Faith acts like a stabilizing carrier wave, focus acts as a selective tuner, repetition reduces the noise, symbol organizes signal, emotion amplifies salience, inner guidance interprets our output. This is not laboratory proof of occult transmission. It is a disciplined, and I need to emphasize that word, disciplined, because inner work is not just doing your shadow work. It is discipline of the self, self-mastery. It is not self-justification. It is not self-egotism. It is not self-explanatory. It is self-discipline. Majority of it is discipline. And applying real-life application, discipline, to real-life activity and or routine. It is a contemplative model, a disciplined contemplative model of how people experience meaning, intuition, received insight during ritual practice, used honestly, the metaphor, it's helpful. Used literally, it does overclaim, so be cautious. Now, the best way to express that model is through an input-output analogy drawn from a computing communications control. Again, I've used this before. I'll use it again. I'll use it in the next few videos because it is a proper analytical standpoint that does project and convey the perfect visual, because if one understands the communications control and input-output flow of an electronic device, one can imagine the chart of said visualization. It is the perfect analogy for this. Now, the input layer consists of day and hour chosen for Mercury, the visual use of green and or red, breath regulations, prayer mantra, sigils named as names such as Tyrael and Teplarthrath, and the stated intention, perhaps truthful speech, better negotiation, intellectual agility, profitable exchange, healing of communication, or discernment under pressure. Our processing layer here is going to include selective attention, visual entrainment, memory activation, symbolic association, emotional sorting, ethical reflection, and the cognitive filtering that happens when the mind is organized around a ritualistic frame. Our output, it's going to include more articulate speech, more strategic listening, better pattern recognition, improved timing, calmer expression, courage to tell the truth, or sharper awareness to where one has been using language to avoid reality itself. It would be intrinsic to accountability and self-growth, or reflective in a higher direction, ascension, evolution, positive momentum. Now, if the practice is sound, our feedback loop is going to be behavior. It should produce cleaner communication, more honest contracts, less self-deception, and more skillful listening. If it produces only excitement, cleverness, or self-flattering intuition, then one has generated mercurial noise rather than mercurial wisdom. Our gnosis is the objective to the planetary magic and the cross-referenced color anchor that we are using in these spiritualistic practices to keep us closer to our divinity, to achieve an overall higher connection with God. Now, its benefits are obvious. Adaptability, curiosity, learning, translation, eloquence, wit, negotiation, invention, profitable timing, and the ability to connect things others keep separate. Its costs are equally obvious. Relentlessness, split motives, excessive cleverness, manipulative speech, chronic irony, gossip, opportunism, anxious overthinking, and a life lived too much in commentary and too little in truth. In karmic terms, Mercury exposes how one has used language, whether to heal, evade, trade, distinguish, disguise, and or dominate. In dharmic terms, Mercury teaches how to speak precisely, listen intelligently, negotiate cleanly, and move information without betraying consciousness. This is why one may pass through a mercurial season of Job, a period where language fails, plans collapse, and one's own divided motives become unbearable to even hear. We cannot look at our own reflection, in other words. But if endured honestly, that same season becomes the beginning of an abundant harvest, because communication purifies by ordeal becoming trustworthy, and trust is one of the highest forms of wealth that Mercury can yield. Very, very wildly underestimated currency is trust. What the synthesis ultimately proposes is that physics, religion, and esoteric symbolism do not need to cancel one another in order to remain meaningful. Physics explains Mercury as a fast inner planet and explains red and green as specific regions of the visible spectrum. Psychology explains attention, color salience, meditation, and the shaping of conscious states through ritual structure. Religion and occult philosophy explain why Mercury continues to function as one of humanity's deepest symbols for speech, trade, timing, trickery, thought, and transition. Tyrion and Tepharthrath personify the two sides of the same current. Mercury as lucid intelligence, and Mercury as volatile cunning. The throat chakra adds a second religious language of speech and truth, though its classical color coding should not be confused with the red-green mercurial adaptation that I used here today. Again, the throat chakra is typically associated with the color blue, which is more of the feminine aspect energies. I will get into all that on a way later video. In the same sense, Mercury is less a superstition than a spiritual question. What happens when human consciousness learns that speech is a force, information is a power, and every message carries moral weight? The answer, whether one gives it to a scientific, religious, or esoteric language, it is all the same. No matter what perspective it is, it all intrinsically has the same exact root. It's like different religions, different sections of the world, different philosophies, different ideologies, different theologies. It all has the underlying same message. Same spirit being God, different bodies being the different views. It all has one singular source. So no matter what your perspective it is, it all comes from the same. There is, hierarchically speaking, one highest God. So everything comes from the one, the source, the all, the grand architect, God. Some call him Jesus, some call him Allah, some call him Krishna, whatever. It is all one and the same. Now, communication never merely travels. It transforms the one who carries it. These are facts. Scientifically, mathematically, philosophically, artistically, and just being. It is all the same root. Just verbalized differently, which is why, you know, I take into consideration other people's perspectives, other people's religions, other people's backgrounds. I enjoy hearing about all of it. I might not agree with some of it. I respect it enough to understand it is just comprehended in a different, unique view than mine, and it is all intrinsic to the same root of being. There is all one singular source to everything. It's like for those who believe in the Big Bang, everything stemmed from that one single moment of all existence. I believe it was Psalms 33:15, and then God spoke the universe into existence. I might be inaccurate about that psalm, but I'm pretty sure it's Psalms 33:15. And then God spoke the universe into existence. The same thing as the Big Bang, worded differently, the same root, the same being, one grand occurrence that created everything in the all, from one singular route navigated. So, no matter how you word it, no matter how you perceive it, no matter how you feel it, it is all from the same natural, one singular source, God. Doesn't matter the name you call him, doesn't matter the religion you are, doesn't matter the part of the world you're in, it is all one singular source. That's all I have for this video. Hopefully you found it entertaining. I'll see you in the next one.